Now, this is an interesting revelation. Resident Evil 4 is no longer on my main drive. But, apart from the long loading times, it's playing surprisingly well still. I want to test the limits of this and just continue playing New Game Plus. If it turns out to be fine, then I will be honest. Bitin. That's the Tagalog word to describe my feeling. I don't know how to translate it to English, but that's what I'm feeling right now. I want to play through the game some more, man. Resident Evil 4, I was fine ending it right then and there because I had already had my fill of that game. But this game I want more of. Still, I'm not quite ready for it to end. Now look at this. It still stutters, but that's to be expected.
Stop it.
Oh, Hunnigan conversation coming up. Yeah, it lags whenever something's
Located
being
baby
loaded.
eagle. It sounds like she's being kept in some church.
Great. That's good news.
I heard it from this guy.
And yeah, I'm watching
Said
videos
his name
about
is
Resident Evil
Luis
Law.
Serra. There's something fishy about him. I need you to run a background check.
We'll call Condor 1. I'll see what I can find. In the meantime,
Wilco?
make your way to that
What's
church.
that mean?
Right. I'm probably
Also,
due for confession
they work
anyway.
fast,
Condor 1.
don't they? Yeah, so I think the remakes, they're working hard to make sure to reboot and redefine the story of all of Resident Evil with these remakes. So I do believe it's plausible for them to remake 5 and 6, make it more horrific, and change the story to make a lot more sense, I suppose. I mean, that's like one of the main reasons, as a writer at least, that you'd want to. As a corporation, it is of course mainly to sell money, to get money.
Yes, you. It's around this month's vacation, eh?
Yeah, this is tolerable.
I can see you're thinking that you've been in spots like this before.
Maybe I should lower the
I
graphics.
guess.
Anything that will lower the graphics memory.
One more guess. Maybe 76 in your lip. Young girl. Talk. No. Alright. See. Heard chatter about moving your senorita. Where knows? But I saw some men dragging someone to the old church. Hanging with you, not helping.
I'd like to get Krause's knife back, please. And quickly. Okay, it's pretty laggy actually. It was pretty promising when the cutscenes were playing without any stuttering.
Here, amigo.
I want to begin with what is not included in the scene. In the original game, while they're
Hey,
tied together,
my gear.
Luis claims to be a police officer from Madrid who was captured by the cult. He does not tell this lie in the remake, though, and I think that's a really smart choice by the
I don't
writers.
think
Any explanation of
those
Luis's
graphics changes
backstory,
did anything.
even if
I'll
it
just
later
put them
turns out
back.
to be a lie, ruins the mystery of his character, one of his essential character traits. The writers don't offer any explanation at all here of Luis's origins or his reasons for being here. When Luis claims to be a Madrid police officer in the original, the audience accepts him. He is no longer as mysterious. He is possibly just some cop who got caught up in all of this. But in the remake, the mystery remains. Somehow he knows who Leon is looking for and where to find her. We're going to have to investigate Luis's origins ourselves. Leon is far more suspicious of Luis in this version of the story. In the first game, he immediately trusts Luis. This new version makes more sense. You really shouldn't trust anyone you meet in this game. It also sets up a more compelling narrative arc. animation on Louis as he backs away. His whole posture and facial expression are so smug. He looks like a total asshole. And that's another core aspect of Louis's character. He has a smooth-talking arrogance. You get the sense that he thinks he can talk his way out of a mess. He's clearly very confident in himself. I don't think he ever once acts afraid or nervous during any of his scenes. He is always totally confident in his abilities right up until the end. So 2 scenes in, and we still don't know almost anything about Louis's backstory, but we do already have a pretty complete picture of his character. Mysterious, funny, confident, and at least somewhat compassionate. Louis doesn't show up in person again for another 3 chapters, but we can start to piece together his backstory through documents and journals and photographs. The first document we need to look at is a report sent by Leon's handler after she looked into Louis's past. Here it is. Name Louis Sarah Navarro, age 28, gender male. Sarah's name first appears publicly in a university student registry. No prior records have been discovered, including his After graduating from university, he was employed by Umbrella's research division, where he became a rising star who won favor among his peers. He was involved in the development of several common over-the-counter drugs, all of which were discontinued before ever reaching the markets. He attached a list for details. A few years later, Sarah resigned from Umbrella and could not be located. After the Raccoon City incident, efforts were made by law enforcement and the government to track down anyone with links to Umbrella. But despite conducting an extensive search, they were unable to find him. Considering how well he evaded them, we are almost certain Sarah went to great lengths to disappear. Common over-the-counter drugs. Do you seriously think Umbrella would let one of their best work on some antacid or BB cream? Okay, first of all, if Louis is 28 years old, then I'm 12 and a half. There's no freaking way this guy is 28. But anyway, this report continues the mystery that is at the center of Louis's character. He appeared as if from nowhere, and then after a successful career, disappeared
I'll be
back
taking
into
these
the
back.
future as if he had never existed at all. This is all new backstory for
Oh, look at all
Louis.
these
In this
names.
remake, Louis was a researcher for the Umbrella Corporation,
They really
a
give me
star among
free?
his peers, which means he must
I'll
have
be
been
making
involved in
reviews
the
of all of them.
development of dangerous bioweapons, some of which we've probably encountered in previous games. Once again, I think this new backstory is a really smart decision by the writers. It connects Louis to the rest of the series in a satisfying way. In the original, Louis is basically just some random guy, but by connecting him to Umbrella in the remake, means he is now connected to the research lab at the center of the first game, and he is connected to the Raccoon City outbreak at the center of the second and
This
third
actually,
games. He
this
is even
scene actually
connected
doesn't
to
make sense
Wester's
because we already
Grand
have.
Plan in the fifth game. Resident Evil is a series of games, and in a series, you want everything to connect. You want all of the pieces to fit together. You want every game to be part of a larger story. Before, Louis was just some random piece floating off on his own. Now, Louis is a snug part of the overall puzzle, and also complicates his relationship with Leon. Leon hates the Umbrella Corporation. After Raccoon City, he isn't going to trust anyone with connections to them. He was already distrustful of Louis. Now, Leon's
something I could
really
pick
not
up.
going to like him.
There are
That
also
means
the
that
rats.
in order for them to trust him
It's
to
just-
work together,
it's just the
their
possible.
relationship is going to have to overcome this huge hurdle. And when it does, that will be a satisfying narrative arc. This is so much more narratively interesting than the original game's story, where they both just sort of immediately like and trust each other. The next document we need to look at is labeled as Old Man's Journal. 3 years ago, my beloved daughter passed away shortly after giving birth to a son. Since then, the boy has grown considerably. He is a very curious child and has a true thirst for knowledge. He even tries to follow after me when I go out hunting. I can't take my eyes off him for a second. Whenever we walk in the forest, he always asks me to tell stories. He's very fond of Don Quixote. The boy is smart and observant beyond his years. If he weren't stuck here, he might have become a scholar. I was a careless fool. I could have sworn I shot clean through the bull's head, and it lunged at me. I was able to make it back to the cabin, but my wound is swollen and discolored. I cannot bear seeing the boy's blurry eyes. My body moves on its own, and I can hear voices inside my head. Am I going mad? I can't die now. Dear God, please protect him. You won't even know that the boy described here is the same one as in the photograph we saw earlier. You have to piece these things together on your own. You have to investigate, you have to explore, you have to engage with the story. At this point of the game, this this note could be describing any of the characters or none of them. The first time I read it, I assumed it might be talking about Sadler or even Mendez, maybe, or possibly neither of them. It could have been.
I don't remember where the rest of the
The
rats
game
are.
doesn't lay it all out for you in an
I think they
obvious
only
way,
show up
and
once
that
they
fits
accept
with
the
mystery, which is one of his
mission.
central character traits. The best mysteries and stories are the ones you have to solve yourself, just so long as the writers have provided you with all the tools you need to solve it. The developers have written movies with a new tragic backstory, in which his father was absent, his mother died in childbirth, and his grandfather was infected by the fog. This adds a new dimension to his character. All of Luis's confidence, his sarcasm, his humor, his goofiness, all of that hides a lot of darkness and trauma. You don't lose your entire family.
Leon, excuse me? Did you just slip through the wall?
Simply being a fun character trait. This new backstory makes it seem more like
Let's do some business then.
Trauma. Laughter and sarcasm and humor are common responses to trauma. If you can't do anything about it, and you'd rather not cry about it anymore, you might as well laugh. And that is Luis's character. There's also an added tragedy and irony in that Luis, with his research, will help spread the exact parasite that once infected his grandfather. We don't know the specific details of how and why Luis joined the Illuminados, whether he was ever a true believer or simply a man
Well
without
done,
any other
deserves
options or
payment
something
in
else.
kind.
Luis's
Got
backstory
some
for all
rare
that's been expanded
things
in
on
this remake
sale,
is actually
stranger.
still quite light on specific details. The writers gave us only enough detail to paint a broad
Knife
picture of the
needs
story
care
of his
every
life.
once in a
That's a
while.
choice made by the
Could be
writers
the
and
difference
developers.
between
They're making a
knife and
bombastic
death.
action horror game, not a visual novel. How much time and space can they dedicate to this character's story? They need to pack in as much story in as little space as possible. And for how little space they had to work with, I think the developers did pack a
Still
lot
have
of
some
story
new
in.
items
From
you
this
might be
document, we also
interested
learned that Luis was an unusually
Better to be
curious child,
over-prepared.
even to the point of risking his own safety. We know that he loved his grandfather, wanted to be with him, worried for him when he was sick. That's the compassion we see in Luis as an adult. He always cared about the people around him. Let's move on now. If you're a very thorough explorer and you return to Mendez's house with Ashley, but you have to go out of your way to do, the game will reward you with
I really
more
don't know what to do about the
backstory.
yellow herb.
This document is labeled as Village Records 1, and it was written by Mendez. There's a young boy who lives in the cabin by the lake with his grandfather. It seems that his mother was called to heaven upon his birth. His grandfather doesn't talk much, but the lad is very bright and spirited. He told me a story about a knight who rides a donkey again today. The boy's grandfather has fallen ill, and his condition worsens every day. The boy worries terribly about him, and there are rumors
think
of
that's
a
worth it,
madness
though.
among the villagers. As I took my leave, the old man pulled me aside and said, "If anything happens, you know what to do." I could only nod in response. It was a terrible night. Everyone stood around the cabin and watched as it burned to the ground. The boy looked on without saying a word. Even as dawn broke, he didn't move a muscle. The next day, he was gone. This is the conclusion of the story being told in the old man's journal. The grandfather would rather die than fall under the control of the parasite. He asks Mendez to kill him, and Mendez acquiesces. Mendez kills the grandfather and burns down the house, while Luis looked on. With nothing left for him in the village, Luis left. He started a new life in the outside world. He went to university. He was employed by the Umbrella Corporation, became one of their star researchers. Later in his life, when he lost everything again, when Umbrella Corporation imploded,
Back
he became
anytime.
one man. He returned to the village.
Welcome.
The
Got
only
a
place he had
selection
left
of good
to return
things
to,
on
and
sale.
He found it under the control of the Illuminados cult. And for some reason, he joined
back
them,
is
aided
killing
them in
me.
researching and spreading the
Years
very
haven't been
parasite which
kind
had
to
killed
us.
his grandfather, which had once destroyed his old life. We can really only
I'll
guess
save
at his
up for the
motivations
tech
here.
upgrade
Maybe
ticket,
he
why
really
not?
believed in Sadler's cause. Maybe he believed a world controlled by Sadler would be a happy one. Maybe he didn't have any other options. Maybe, like so many others, he was just trying to survive for another
How do I
day.
get this note?
You can't go wrong with that.
Mendez's attic. This is the exact same photograph as before.
Will
Except
that be
this one
all,
has
then?
writing on it. It says Navarro family, 1981,
I'll
and it is
buy
labeled as
almost
photo of a boy
anything.
and his grandfather. This is confirmation that the boy we've been learning about is Luis. This is a photo of him and his grandfather. Except I still didn't realize that when I first found this photograph. Like most fans, I know Luis as Luis Serra, because that was his name in the original. I completely overlooked that the developers gave him a second surname in the remake. His new name is Louis Sarah
Your
Navarro, and I
valuables
wasn't paying
won't
attention.
do you
So when
much
I saw
good in
that
this
photograph
grave.
and it said
Well
Navarro
then,
family,
what
I was
can I
like,
do
who the heck is the Navarro family? It wasn't until Louis started talking
Easy.
about Don Quixote that I finally made the connection between the boy.
Crossing your
That's a
T's.
danger
Don't
of
get
this style
yourself
of
killed now.
storytelling. You leave it up to the players to piece together your story. Sometimes they will miss what should be an obvious detail and bungle the whole thing. I already had all of the pieces of Louis's story by this point in the game, but failed to put them together until much later. Alright, let's watch Louis's next cutscene.
Over here!
Welcome.
You. Hey, listen, what's your here? Hey, I see you found your missing senorita.
Senorita has a name, Miss Ashley. You are?
Name's Luis. I'm a prick. We all have names. Now I know. Who are you? What are you doing here? Very good questions, unfortunately. Hi, now. In that case, here, help me. Ashley, quick, over here. Go.
I want to buy the Sentinel 9 or Punisher back. If it is just Dust Girl.
And so begins one of the most famous set pieces in action video game history. I really can't overstate how incredibly scary, intense, and cool this cabin fight was the first time I experienced it in the original game, and Louis is central to that. I think a lot of the reason fans liked Louis is less for his character, and more for
Ruby's
the
all
specific
rubbish, he makes
gameplay
no
segment
difference.
where you and he together fight off a seemingly
That's
endless
our
and
choice,
impossible
mate.
horde of zombies in a very confined space. And he is actually useful as an NPC, a rarity at the time of the original's release. He draws the enemy's attention, gets some shots off, spouts off silly one-liners to diffuse some of the tension. This whole sequence is masterfully done, and I'm going to talk about it more in a later video, where I'll dig into how Resident Evil 4 crafts its particular style of horror. But this is a video about Louis, so we need to talk about him. Louis offers Leon and Ashley shelter when they are being chased by a zombies, which speaks to that fundamental compassion within his character.
Good
When
work.
he sees someone in trouble, he tries to help. Unlike in the original game where Leon and Louis immediately start working together, here Leon is still very distrustful of Louis, which is understandable considering both of their histories with Umbrella. I've already talked about how this is a part of setting up a much more compelling and satisfying narrative arc for their relationship. Two characters who have to learn to trust each other is a much more compelling story than one about two characters who automatically trust each other
Why not
without
try
any
your hand at a new gun?
and this cabin fight is a part of that. I also want to talk about the cutting of a certain line in this scene. In the original game, when meeting Ashley, Louis very famously says, "Well, I see that the president has equipped his daughter with ballistics too." While the camera zoomed
I'm not
in
really
on
sure
her
how to
breasts,
feel about the
I think it's
black
obvious
tail.
why that line was
We
cut.
already have
Well,
the
it
Red
was
9,
funny because of how completely
and this gun is literally
ludicrous
just
and
an
stupid
inferior
it
version
was.
of that
It
gun.
also made Louis seem like a weird creepo. Don't
You
comment
know,
on the
the
size of a girl's
Red 9
breasts
can get
the
a
very
spot.
first time you
This
meet her,
gun
man.
cannot.
That is tacky and lame. The Raiders want
The
you to
SG9
like
and the
Louis,
Punisher.
and there's a significant portion of the audience who is not going to like him if he behaves like a sleaze. So while the game loses some of its campiness, I think this was a very smart cut. There's also a really clever mixing of gameplay and story happening during this segment. Not only is Leon the character learning,
the
but
first
so
three
is
hands
the
at
player.
least
This is a
have.
very difficult section of the game, as is it probably wouldn't be possible to complete if you didn't have this AI helper with you. He's not quite as effective at killing zombies as I would have liked, but as a distraction and a source of ammo,
Got a
he helps a lot.
selection
You will
of
develop
good
a liking
things
for
on
him just
sale.
because he helped you complete one of the toughest sections of the game. After escaping from the cabin, we get this scene.
Molding a weapon to suit your specific needs.
Yes, I'll go buy
We're
it.
starting to get an idea of your taste.
First upgrades.
What's happening to me?
Ashley, is this the first time you've cuffed up like this? You want start explaining.
The cough, the blood, is caused by something called plaga. Okay. You saw those people, right? You have the same
And I
thing
actually do
inside
have
you.
enough space.
Same
Welcome.
thing to beat them.
Ooh,
And that
what you buying?
is what you're experiencing.
And
These
the Punisher's
symptoms.
actually pretty weak,
That cash in your pocket?
but
or
the
your
penetration,
life?
Like them.
I think, makes it
You are,
super
well,
worth it. I just really like this gun.
see, at this early
Along with
stage,
the right gun,
virus
but
and plaga
they're not worth it.
is possible to remove it with a surgical procedure. All you need is some know-how. Oh yeah, the right equipment.
And the SR is just confusing because it's literally just inferior to the new sniper you
But you
eventually
don't have to
get.
trust me.
I like the handguns because they all have their perks and flaws, but then there's the snipers.
Great.
Well, there is
We're
this
partners
one.
then. Hey,
Now-
are you? No time for any questions. The clock is ticking. Why are you helping us? Because it makes me feel better. Let's leave it at that. We'll contact you later.
In this scene, Luis mostly
Where you
serves
gonna
as a
put
source of
this? Your
exposition.
pocket?
He's here to provide both Leon and the player with information about the Plaga parasite, most of which is unnecessary. The player could easily figure out most of this for themselves. We do see more of that compassion at the center of Luis's character here. He is worried about Ashley and offers help. We get a little more backstory too. Once upon a time, Luis himself was infected by the Plaga but conducted surgery on his own
Got a
body for
selection
removal,
of good
which is pretty
things
freaking
on
hardcore.
sale.
We see more of his overwhelming confidence. He has a plan.
If you
He
want
has it
a
all
fighting
figured out
chance
already.
out there,
Just leave it up to
best
Luis.
you dazzled,
Luis never
are you?
fails. He very
Oh,
explicitly
Christ.
calls out what will be the central theme of his and
Don't get-
Leon's relationship, learning to trust each other. But the most important thing we learn about his character in this scene is in that final exchange, when Leon asks, "Why are you
Self-killed
helping us?"
now.
And Luis says, "Because it makes me feel better." This is Luis's central motivation in the story. He doesn't
give it
show
two
it, but the truth
saves. I
is he
still
feels
wanna have
terrible for the
the safety
mistakes he
net.
has made. He feels terrible about helping Umbrella develop deadly bioweapons. He feels terrible about helping the tyrant Sadler spread the Plaga. He feels like
Wow.
a shitty person because, judging him by the consequences of his actions, he is a shitty person. For all his likability, all his humor, how hard he works to correct his past mistakes, Luis really has done some shitty things. And feeling bad about those mistakes doesn't exonerate him. He has to redeem himself through his actions, and that is his motivation. No one wants to be a bad person. Everyone wants
been
to be
waiting.
good. Everyone
Got
wants
my
to
hands
be
on a
better.
fine
And that's
piece
what
of
makes Luis such a compelling character in this remake. That desire to be better. Next is the scene where Luis and Ada interact, so let's watch it.
Hey, got a smoke?
I do. The kind you like. Now where's the Amber?
Fortunately, it's not done yet. And you really should be telling me what a good job I did. Busted my ass and managed to hide it right before I got caught. Bitch. Is why I'm still alive.
The deal was, we get you out of here when you deliver the Amber. No Amber, no protection, please.
Such a stickler for details, Hyde. Okay then. I'll go get it now. How about that?
Leon turned on the flashlight here. Really sucks. Since it's pitch black.
I do have something else I need to get to.
Luis is a character who wants to be better. He has made mistakes, and he has a strong desire to fix those mistakes. And yet in this scene, we learn that Luis, like so many other people who are trying to be better, he can't help but keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Luis's greatest mistake is selling his talents and his knowledge to the worst possible people. First Umbrella, and then the Illuminados. Even though he regrets doing that, here he is making the same mistake again. He is selling his talents and his knowledge to Wesker, who is even worse than Umbrella or the Illuminados. This is very human behavior. Everyone does this. There is something about human nature that makes us do the same stupid things again and again. Luis is a flawed character. He isn't just someone who made mistakes in the past and is now trying to correct them. He is a character who is still making mistakes. That makes him a very human character. It's good writing. Moving on, in the castle section of the game, Luis calls Leon twice, first promising that he has the parasite suppressant, and then saying he got into trouble and needs Leon's help. Both times, Luis fails to actually show up where he said they would meet, further straining his relationship with Leon, further straining that developing sense of trust between them. After a pretty grueling adventure through the dark depths of the castle, Luis finally shows up, so let's watch it.
I'll make it cheap for you. Doing better. Yeah, seems like it worked. Bad news. All we've done is buy you some time. Suppressant's effects will wear off too soon. There you go. Don't worry about me. Ashley is the priority. In that case, you know what we have to do. Then come, Sancho Panza. Let us rescue Princess Dulcinea. She can hurt herself. Hey, that was my dance. Hey, hurry, I get it.
Luis has followed through with his promise to help Leon and Ashley. For all his past mistakes, this time he gets it right. This time he actually helps someone. We get a lot more of his silliness and confidence here. He's quite dashing. He doesn't hesitate to join Leon in his fight to rescue Ashley. And then we start getting the Don Quixote references. Luis makes a lot of allusions to the 17th century Spanish novel in his dialogue, specifically casting himself in the role of the titular main character. Anytime in any film, novel, or game, when a character starts referencing some famous work over and over again, that's the writers trying to tell you something about the character. In some way, the themes of that famous work will be relevant to the character's story. With these frequent references to Don Quixote, the writers of Resident Evil 4 are trying to tell us something about Luis's character, so let's see if we can figure out what that is. The novel Don Quixote tells the story of a possibly insane minor Spanish noble who is obsessed with stories of chivalry and adventure, so much so that he embarks on his own ridiculous grand adventure. However, the world is not as grand or honorable as he believes it to be, and as his adventures collide with grim reality, they mostly range from farcical to downright depressing. The novel has been interpreted by 10,000 different critics to mean 10,000 different things, but everyone agrees that the conflict between the main character's romantic but mostly imaginary idealism and the crushing realism that surrounds him is central to that meaning. So what does this have to do with Luis? Well, Luis is on a fantastical and impossible journey of his own, and he too doesn't realize how impossible that journey really is. He doesn't realize that he is living in a fantasy world. Luis really believes that he can charm and schmooze his way out of the terrible web that is around himself. He believes he can manipulate or fight the Illuminados and Wesker and the whole world. He thinks he can betray everyone and anyone, switch alliances, make deals, and somehow, some way, it'll all work out for him. And his supreme and total confidence will carry him through every deadly obstacle. But he's wrong. That's just some fantasy he's living in. Like Don Quixote, he is going to be crushed by the realities of the world he lives in. Luis is a doomed character. Before the game even begins, he is already doomed. He is a dead man walking. He has doomed himself with his own decisions. His mistakes are just taking a while to catch up with him. His decision to work with Umbrella, then to work with the Illuminados, then to betray them and work with Wesker. These decisions have cost him his life. This is another thing that makes Lucas' story so compelling.
Money gun will
Resident Evil
look
games
great
have such
with that.
ridiculous stories with ridiculous characters who are all
I
doing
don't agree.
ridiculous things. But in the middle of all that
I also
absurdity,
think this
here
game
is
kinda
this
looks
single
terrible.
character who is facing real and serious consequences for his mistakes. The story is not going to let Luis go. It is going to punish him for those past mistakes. It's kind of a weird choice by the writers to take his story in particular so seriously. It doesn't really fit with all the camp and goofiness in the game. I think there's a simple explanation for this seeming contradiction in styles, which is that all writers everywhere, even those writing silly, over-the-top action horror video game plots, want to write about something real, want to write about something important. Writers can't help themselves. It's in their blood to gravitate towards meaningful themes. And when done well, it can uplift any work, even something as silly as Resident Evil. The Resident Evil 4 Remake is more memorable because it takes Luis' story seriously. It hits harder, it makes you feel something. Let's move on now because we've got to kill this Joker. From this scene forward, Leon and Luis spend a ton of time together. There's a very lengthy part of the game which essentially becomes a buddy cop movie. There's all kinds of ridiculous action set pieces here, like this minecart ride or this fight against two trolls. This part of the game is super duper fun. Luis is a really fun character to spend time with. He's constantly spouting off stupid one-liners and is genuinely useful in combat, if only as a distraction. After all the horror and terror and stress of the previous sections of the game, this section with Luis feels much more light and fun. Feels much more like a traditional action game. And Leon finally learns to trust Luis. By fighting side by side, by working together, by helping each other, they begin to trust each other. They become friends again. It's a delightful and satisfying development for their relationship's arc. Of course, it's all only a temporary thing. Luis is living a fantasy which must crash headfirst into reality eventually. So let's watch for these mistakes and catch up to them.
It tastes so good. It'll make you dance.
Watch when his mistakes finally catch up to him.
Out of that hell! This air is sculling our names for freedom. Thus, made it all this way. You know it means we're almost.
What's what?
Why are there so many explosions?
Long time no see me. Major Krauser? What the hell? Why? Covering stolen goods. And rats in the way.
What follows is a long fight with Krauser, which I'm going to skip over to get to Luis's final scene, and then we'll have a lot to talk about.
I don't fire on me. You haven't changed a damn bit. What a disappointment. Looking good, eh, my friend? Such a loss of the ladies of the world. Don't talk. Take these. It's my laboratory. Go there. Sit down. For their sakes.
I went the wrong way.
Had a pretty shitty life. But now, eh? What do you think, Leon? Can change, right?
Ah, there's an expanded treasure there. You know, it's not working.
relationship began with ridiculously incompetent asking Leon for a
What an
cigarette,
idiot.
and now, at the end of their relationship, Leon finally does give him that smoke, and it's not very funny at all anymore, but it does seal their friendship. I said it at the beginning of this video, and I'll repeat it here. This death scene hits really hard. It's because that final line, "Can people change?" feels so genuine, so authentic. This is such a true tragedy. And Luis's life is a tragedy. It took him too long to change. He lived the same shitty life for too long. He made the same mistakes for too long. Like so many people, he probably thought he had more time. He thought he would have more time to become that better version of himself tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that. Next week, he could stop making the same mistakes. But time is the most limited resource of all, and Luis's has run out, just as it will for all of us someday. In the original game, after his death, the story completely forgot about Luis. He was never mentioned again. In this remake, his choices live on after him. For all his mistakes, he made at least one right decision, and that was to help Leon and Ashley. In his final act, Luis saves Leon's life, and then gives him this key. For the rest of the game, this key is in your inventory. Fast forward to the end of the game, and when you finally unlock the door to Luis's lab, and his surgical chair removes both Ashley and Leon's parasites, Luis has saved them for a second time. And this is part of what makes that death scene earlier, and his entire story so compelling. It's not just that his death scene itself is so well crafted, it's that there's so much payoff later. That death mattered. He continues to have a significant narrative presence in the story afterwards. Luis's lab also contains several more documents which tell more of his backstory, so I will end this video by examining some of those. First, here's a photograph labeled Group Photo, which shows a group of smiling scientists holding a banner with the Umbrella logo and the words, Europe Laboratory 6 Dream Team. This is Luis's team of researchers from back when he worked for Umbrella. What catches my attention are the smiles on their faces, the excitement you can see in the expressions of the scientists. Umbrella Corporation are the bad guys of the first 3 Resident Evil games, responsible for an uncountable number of nightmares and atrocities. Whenever I picture Umbrella, I picture a bunch of scummy, cynical, profit-driven pieces of crap who don't care who their research hurts so long as it makes them more money. But here we see a very different version of that company. Think about it from Luis's perspective. He had pulled himself out of nothing, out of nowhere, with no family and no support structure. When he was hired by Umbrella, it must have felt like the vindication of years of hard work, like he was finally catching a break, like he was finally being given the opportunity to excel in his field. He must have felt like his life was changing. He would have been excited, and you can see that excitement in this photo. However, at Umbrella, Luis's dreams turned rotten. He wasn't changing the world for a better there. He was creating lab-grown monsters. The next document we're going to look at is Sadler's Animus. Do not be fooled into thinking that Lost Pockets are merely tools for creating powerful bioweapons. Their true value lies in their ability to control, no matter how hostile the subject. A single injection can turn anyone into a faithful servant. Who needs spies when you can turn yesterday's enemy into today's ally? Controlling just one insider can bring an entire organization, an entire country to its knees. Mass production of these superior species has made this possible. We have empowered Sadler. It is clear what he intends to do next. Can you imagine if Sadler had that much control? 6 billion loyal servants at his sole command. There would be no opposition, no war. Maybe for the first time in human history, the world would know peace. But I know how Sadler and the others have oppressed the people of this island for generations. I know how he treats them. That's no way to live. And because of that, I won't let it happen. In this message, I think we get a hint as to Luis's motivation to join the Illuminados. It's in that line, maybe for the first time in human history, the world would know peace. I suspect that, after the horrors of the Umbrella Corporation, Luis wanted to do good, and he genuinely thought he might be able to do good by researching the pocket parasite. He saw the power it offered, how it could grant incredible strength and miraculous healing properties to those infected. I'm guessing he thought he could find a way to exploit those properties. However, over time, he realized that the true purpose of the Plaga was its power and control. He realized that by bioengineering a superior species of Plaga, he had given Sadler the potential to rule the entire world. During his time with the Illuminados, he saw how Sadler treated those beneath him, the squalor and pain his servants lived among. And so Luis dedicated himself to stopping Sadler. He would have to use cunning, charm, manipulation, negotiation. He would have to betray the Illuminados, make deals with people like Wesker, put himself in great danger. It was this decision that truly doomed him. When he finally chose to do the right thing to stop a madman, that's when his fate was sealed. Finally, to conclude this very long video, let's look at the Amber. This sample, which I've come to call the Amber, was just sitting in the storeroom collecting dust. We used to have ample specimens for experimentation in the past, so it makes sense that this one was overlooked. In fact, the only reason I brought it back to my lab was because of its peculiar shape. After a basic analysis, I've changed my mind. The Amber possesses a very unique quality. Although small and in a suspended state, it contains the same organ found in the dominant species, which we've only seen in Sadler himself. When fully developed, the Amber may rival, or perhaps even surpass, Sadler's power. Unfortunately, the Amber was confiscated by Sadler before I could make any further progress in my research. He may be on to me. I need to get my hands on that sample again and escape in order to continue my research elsewhere. It's the only way to counter Sadler. Of course, I don't think I can trust this outside group either, but I've already come this far. Hopefully I can sweet talk my way out of this one too. I'll have to for the world's sake. Here we get an explanation for what that Amber, which Luis was trying to sell to Ada, and which Krauser killed him for, actually was. In the remake story, there are only 2 specimens of the dominant species of the Plaga in existence. Only 2 Plaga with the power to control all others. One of them exists inside of Sadler's body, and the other is suspended in that Amber. It's notable here that Luis never actually trusted Wesker's organization. He was always only using them as a means to escape, so he could continue his fight against Sadler elsewhere. The deal was that he would trade the Amber and his research in exchange for safety, but it was always a risk. It's also notable when he writes, "Hopefully, I can sweet-talk my way out of this one too." That overconfident persona Luis puts on, where he acts like he can handle any situation on his own, is just an act. That word, hopefully, here reveals that he is only blunting. He doesn't know if he can sweet-talk his way through anything. He's just improvising. He never really had any plan at all. He was just taking advantage of the cards which were dealt to him. That is that Don Quixote imaginary idealism. He was living in a fantasy, and he knew it. He was never going to be able to outsmart Wesker. He wasn't even able to outmaneuver Sadler. If Leon hadn't come along, he would have been recaptured. He was always doomed. Luis never had a chance, but there's still something noble in his struggle. Most of the characters in the Resident Evil series are pretty shallow. They're either good guys or they're bad guys. If they're good guys, they basically only ever do good and fight for justice, and they always win. If they're bad guys, then they are unredeemably evil, only ever do wrong, and always lose. But Luis in the remake is something else.
I was
He's a
planning
good
on
guy
using
who has
that
made too
against
many
them,
mistakes
but I
to
accidentally
survive.
ran
He's
into
an
it
essentially
myself.
compassionate character who has served nearly every single movie in the series, and that service ultimately destroys him. He is an overconfident smooth talker whose humor belies an inner trauma. He is kind but flawed. He is doomed by his own choices but also redeemed by them. He grew up in tragedy and lived among monsters, but in the end he's still trying to do the right thing. He dies hoping for the possibility of change, for the possibility of being better, but never knowing if that belief was in something true or just another quixotic fantasy. For all these reasons, his is the most moving death of any in the Resident Evil series, and he the most tragic but ultimately optimistic of its characters, because he did change. His efforts to save Leon and Ashley go on to save everyone. In the end, his final act was the one that mattered most, because it's the only one of his choices that truly outlived him.
I don't get you. Why risk your life like this? You don't know us.
I told you. It makes me feel better.
Be straight with me once.
What?
Los Iluminados.
I can break them.
See, there you go.
Helping the two of you doesn't make up for it. I know that. But still, I don't want anyone else to get hurt.
In that case, you better get serious.
Harsh words for a squire.
sworn there was treasure in here. No. Treasure, you know. Perhaps it's inside. As usual. Oh, something.
Sorry, must have slipped.
I just realized you can't kick down doors anymore. I mean, opening doors is a super seamless thing now, and you always kicked open doors anyway. But it's a little sad that you can't do that anymore.
Frankly, it's a pretty poopy looking world. In one of his files, Luis states that a world in which everyone everywhere was infected by the parasite, where everyone is a part of this single hive mind, would be a world without war or violence, a world of peace. But we see here that peace would come at a heavy price. All people would lose free will, and most people would lose their intellect. And Lord Sadler doesn't treat his subjects very well. They live in squalor. At the end of Chapter 1, Leon is infected by the Plaga. While unconscious, Leon has some sort of vision, and in this vision we finally see Sadler for the first time. This scene is the villain's introduction, so let's watch it and see how he's being portrayed.
Sacrificial lamb. You will receive her most sacred body.
Someone has shown up in
It
neighbors.
begins now.
Yay.
This is a very short scene. You don't see much of Sadler here. And that's actually an interesting part of how Sadler's character is developed in the early game. He is a largely hands-off villain. He works through his network of zombies and minions rather than taking care of business on his own. For the first several hours of the game, you will see very little of him. In this way, he is a classic action video game villain. You have to fight your way through all of his henchmen before you can reach him. It's only after all of his subordinates have failed that he takes to the battlefield himself. Of course, we eventually discover that, through the hive mind, all of these zombies and minions are essentially extensions of himself. He may seem like a distant, hands-off villain, but really, everyone here is Sadler. Everyone here shares his will. The writers are also building up a lot of mystery around his character here. He is shrouded in shadows, wearing dark robes. You see very little of him. You don't know anything about his motivations yet. You don't know his name. At this point, you wouldn't even know for sure that he's the main villain of the game. All you know about him is 2 lines of rambling, religious-sounding talk. Talk of sacrificial lambs and sacred bodies. From here, Sadler disappears from the game for a couple hours. But even when he's absent, the game develops his character. You can find his portrait hanging in some prominent places, establishing his importance to the local people. You can find mentions of a Lord Sadler in various notes throughout the area. You can find verses from the cult's holy text. It's all pretty vague and sparse, but what the writers are doing is slowly building up his character through epistolary elements, rewarding players who care enough to explore with stringent pieces of a story they can put together themselves. Slowly you'll come to understand that this cult is ruled by a man named Sadler, that everyone here is fanatically loyal to him, that he is imparting blessings or gifts upon the local population, and that he is very focused on Ashley, the president's daughter. You will also see more of the world that Sadler would create. It is a world of monsters, of rot, and of death. The game shows you that his is a rotten soul by showing you the rotten environment in which he rules. The writers don't need to bring the big man himself on screen to accomplish this. At the end of Chapter 3, after battling Delago, Leon throws up blood, passes out, and has another vision of Sadler, and we finally see the main villain again. This vision is pretty similar to the previous one, but it includes some important additions, and it's still pretty short, so let's watch it.
Sacrificial man. You will receive.
I like how you have to solve a puzzle so that you can solve another puzzle.
Now. You join our covenant to share my holy blessing forever.
Once again, Sadler is hidden in shadows, his face obscured. All of Sadler's dialogue is totally filled with religious language, much of it a sort of twisted mirror of Christian symbolism. Sacrifice, lamb, sacred body, covenant, holy blessing. These are all words you might hear in a Christian church, but they mean something very different here. The writers are using familiar religious language to define what kind of cult this is. It is an organized religion. It involves a covenant with a sacred being. Worshippers will receive blessings from this being. From all the horror and misery in the game, players will already know that this sacred being and its blessings must be horrific. One other interesting thing about his dialogue is when he says, "You will share in my holy blessing." Sadler so closely associates himself with his god that he believes himself to be a god too. Sadler is not just a prophet or cleric for his god. His body is literally a vessel for his god. It lives within him. He and his god are biologically inseparable. It is impossible to say where the parasite ends and where the man begins. The next time we see a vision of Sadler is after Leon has finally found Ashley, so let's watch that too.
As you live. The last names are escaping.
See, the team plays pretty well.
The blood has accepted the gift.
Look at Ada, she's also a special agent and she's way better equipped than we are. In the original, we did have grappling hooks and stuff too, but we only ever used them in cutscenes. In the end, for all those special movement options Leon was given access to, he was still only given 20 ammo and handgun, and an first aid spray for this mission. And here though, it is just the gun and spray, and ammo, and knives. Well, that's a personal belonging chest though. And here I was thinking I'd be playing frickin'
They are already beginning to share in Sadler's hive mind, so when he telepathically orders the villagers to pursue them, both Leon and Ashley can hear that order spoken too. This is the first time in the game where we get confirmation that Sadler is in both constant telepathic communication with all of his followers and in direct control of their actions. His language
here I was thinking I could just
bathed in religious terminology. He doesn't tell his followers to kill or hurt Ashley early on, but instead much more vaguely to deliver unto them salvation.
Hey, honey
He
pop.
calls Ashley and
Honey
Leon
pop?
lost lambs. I think he's being genuine. I think he really thinks like, oh, those poor kids, they haven't seen the truth yet. Let's help them out with pitchforks and hatchets. His moral compass is so warped that he really believes he's doing the right thing, when it's so obvious to any outside observer that he's the bad guy here. The next time we see Sadler is a little different. We don't see him in a vision. We don't even see him in person. Instead, we see him through Ashley, who is infected by the parasite and under his control. So let's watch it.
Looks like third place. Okay.
I think so. Instead of worrying about her, worry about your own skin. Foolish little lamb. Temperance, child. Bruce to Condor 1. I've got that intel you requested on Louis Serra. It seems he used to be a
Umbrella? I should have left him in that bag to rot.
I'm sending you the details. Take a look.
Sad.
A baby eagle is your priority.
Plaga hive mind
Copy
looks
that.
like. There is no
Making my way to
separation
church.
between Ashley's
Condor
body
1.
and Sadler's body here. No separation between their wills. In this scene, Sadler and Ashley have a single mind, and it's not a shared mind. This is not a hive mind scenario where both Sadler and Ashley share each other's thoughts. This is a hive mind scenario where both Ashley and Sadler think Sadler's thoughts, and only his thoughts, only his will. Ashley as an individual, as a person, as a life, essentially ceases to exist.
Well, no
This is
worries.
something else that makes Sadler a really good villain. At the most basic level, every action game that you use to see
Yes, I know, this is a scripted thing.
right for the story to function. And in this scene, Sadler is all
Take
of
care of
those
yourself,
things. Before this scene, you only ever saw his power secondhand
The only
through his
good dog.
followers, but now you finally see it firsthand, and he is extremely powerful.
Dogs
How
are
can you
either
fight
the
someone
worst
who
of
can
the worst
control your mind
or
and
the
your
best of
body?
the best.
How can
There's
you
no
fight
in
someone
between
who
when it comes
generates
to them
your
in
will,
media.
your individuality, your thoughts, and replace them with his own? Doesn't even have to be nearby to accomplish this. He is miles away and still possesses this level of control over her. This is the future of the entire world as Sadler's plans succeed. Everyone, everywhere will be him. It's not a hive mind so much as it is a single mind, his mind and no other. It's another couple hours before we see our final vision of Sadler. Leon has separated from Ashley and dropped down into the depths of Salazar Castle. As he
Resources.
makes his way back up, he sees Sadler again. The scene mostly
Oh my
repeats
gunpowder,
things we've already
useless.
seen, but it does include an interesting perspective reveal, so we should watch it.
Pitiful little lamb. No suffering, Kenny. Just as it has from his daughter, who has joined us in communion, and now she is of our flesh, of our blood. My faithful disciple will show her the bag. Go now. Deliver to these vagrant children their salvation. As you wish.
All this time, we thought we were just seeing Sadler in Leon's mind, but in reality, we've been seeing Sadler through the eyes of Krauser. This suggests some interesting things about how the hive mind's shared telepathy works. Since both Leon and Krauser are a part of the Plaga hive mind, Leon can see through Krauser's eyes. This means that not only can Sadler see through his minions' hundreds of eyes, but all of them can probably see through each other's eyes too. I find Sadler's use of the collective first person interesting here. Join us in communion, our flesh, our blood. I think this is Sadler speaking for both himself and the Plaga within his body,
Why can it only be
with
used
the hive
once?
mind. I've seen theories that say Sadler is just a tool for the Plaga, that he
Consumable
is
piece
being
never
controlled
made
by the
sense.
parasite too. However, this use of the collective first person suggests to me that the Plaga are instinctive Instead, they share a collective will, merging of their being and the Plaga
boy.
are one being. Do you control your arms or legs, or are your arms and legs simply a difference? I think Sadler and Plaga have a similar relationship. They are the same body. It's a couple more hours before we see Sadler again, and this time in person, in the flesh, so let's watch it.
Prostrate yourself. This is a holy body. Our divine providence is you. Such a profound lesson. Oh. Lost Plaga. Welcome, my children. speaker for our Lord. Tell someone who gives a shit. Foolish lambs. Why do you deny Green? Now, abandon your body. Obey the voice of our Lord.
I forgot about the dogs.
Sweet child, not resist. Pray for these wicked sinners. My faithful disciples shall deliver to you your pennies. Now, child, you need not be afraid. Submit your body and release yourself from fear.
I find this scene to be a little strange. This is the first time in the entire game that Leon and Sadler finally meet face to face. This is the villain of the story. This is the big bad. This is the man who could soon conquer the world. The story has been building up to this moment for hours, and yet this first meeting is kind of underwhelming. The meeting takes place in some random warehouse. There's no build up to this scene at all. He just randomly wanders in and starts monologuing. There isn't any dramatic new show of power here. We've already seen him in control of Ashley before. That's nothing new. We already knew he could do that. The scene is an interesting moment for her character story, where she's gone from Little Miss Damsel in Distress to having a semi-successful battle of wills against the villain. I think that part of the scene is well written, but as the proper introduction of Sadler to the story, I feel like the writers bungled this one. If I were writing the story, I would not have introduced him like this. I would have written this to be much more dramatic. I would have tried to make him seem much bigger, much more exciting and intimidating. I definitely would not have had him just randomly wander on screen and build up at all. I will say that I love his new design in this remake. The way his flesh and the parasite are so horrifically but perfectly put together. Both really gross to look at, but also does an excellent job visually of showing his relationship to the Walker. He's not being controlled by the parasite. You can see here that physically there's no separation between him and that parasite. I also love the way that Leon just starts shooting. Most action game protagonists have the courtesy to let a villain finish their monologue, but Leon's just like, tell someone who gives a shit, and then just shoots him right in the head. I really love it. It's really fun. I think it's also interesting how little Sadler cares about his servants. Ashley shoots and kills 2 of them, and he doesn't react at all. Those aren't people to him. They're just things, just parts of his body to be cast off at any time, like a broken toenail. Notice their visual design. Buckets of the servants. What? It's really fat. Obvious ways to distinguish 2 individuals is that 2 individuals will look different. Their bodies will look different. Facial features. However, if you cover 2 people up with this identical white fabric, their individuality is lost. All of his servants in this scene look the same. Visually, this reflects their internal loss of individuality. These are not individuals. Their will has been overwritten by Sadler's. They have no thoughts of their own. These are extensions of the Plaga Highline. The next time we see Sadler is in the cult's innermost sanctuary, so let's watch it.
I'll just ignore the dogs.
You have come, my child. What do you want? I wish to share this gift with as many as possible. A humble wish, don't you think? You see, we are all connected through the holy body. And now your flesh and bone, your very thoughts, are already one with us. Shit.
sacred gift. I achieved it. Sadler! Ah, yes, the time has come. All this land to join our covenant. Blessings on him and the sweet mercy they bring. Exalt all and let it be done. Leon! Go!
I fucking parried. It must be because it's only perfect parries allowed now or something.
Sorry, must have
infection to as many people as
Where did
possible.
she go?
I've seen some people say, "Oh, in this remake, Sadler doesn't want power for himself at all anymore. Now his new sole motivation is spreading the
She
bond,
clicked
which
out
she
of bounds,
believes is
I
a
guess.
genuine gift which will benefit all, spreading peace and
Yeah,
care across the world.
slipped a little
He
too
isn't
much.
the purely selfish, power-hungry villain he
My
was in
bad.
the original game. And I do think there is some truth.
Oh, hello.
I think
Scared
Sadler
me.
is a true believer in the perceived sacred power of Manga. I think he really does think humanity would be better off if everyone received this supposed gift. But you can't ignore that the spreading of the parasite will also increase his personal power. Every new person infected by the parasite is a new person under his control. A world where everyone has been infected is a world where he controls everyone. Even in the most generous analysis of his motivations, he isn't acting totally benevolent here. He's still the same power-mad, greedy villain from the original version of the game. His belief in the holiness of the parasite has increased in this remake story, but his desire for power has not decreased. Notice that line when he asks Leon, "Why do you reject serenity?" This is a good example of his mix of motivations. On the one hand, I do think this is a genuine question. Many others have accepted his gift of the power of the parasite in the serenity of submission willingly. I don't think he really understands why Leon is rejecting it. On the other hand, if he can convince Leon to just submit, that obviously still increases his personal power. That would give him power over Leon. Sadler's motivations are a mix of genuine religious belief and hunger for power, since he identifies himself with his god, since he is the literal physical vessel in which his god lives. Those two motivations are intricately tied together. For him, worshiping his god is the same as increasing his own power. One final note here before we move on. Notice Sadler's attitude. He is very calm and collected. He has been calm in every scene he has appeared in so far. No matter what Leon does, no matter how Sadler's strongest
Lovely to see you
no matter
too.
how his plans are ruined, he has maintained control of himself. We haven't seen any emotional outbursts from him. He even takes all those bullets from Ada's gun pretty calmly. He still doesn't really seem that upset about it. This is important because in the next scene, Sadler's final scene in the game, he will finally lose his cool. Here it is.
Sadler!
Forgot about the snake.
Sadler is still calm, still in control of himself, because he believes, despite everything he's lost, that he is still ultimately in control of the situation. But when Leon escapes from his grasp, he finally realizes that he's lost control, and that's when he loses his cool too. He finally finally becomes angry, and that anger literally transforms his body in a way that's pretty common in the Resident Evil series. Nearly every single villain in the series experiences a loss of control over their emotions that coincides with a horrific physical transformation of their bodies. It is interesting the particular form that Sadler's anger takes here. He says, "You have forsaken the holy body, the great gift." He isn't upset that Leon shot him in the face 20 times. He isn't upset that Leon spoiled his plans for world domination. He isn't upset that Leon killed all his henchmen. What really upsets him is that Leon keeps rejecting his gift. Sadler is trying to bestow upon Leon the greatest gift he knows, the sacred body. He could have just killed Leon way earlier in the story. Sadler chose to spare him more than once to invite him into this Covenant hive mind. It's this rejection that infuriates him that causes him to finally lose control. And then Sadler transforms into a giant spider monster. He does have some interesting dialogue during this final battle. He tells Leon that if Leon just submits, Sadler will still bestow him with the holy body. This is actually kind of interesting. Usually at this point in the story, a villain would be like, "I'm gonna kill you no matter what, you suck, man." But even now, Sadler's primary motivation is the spread of the Plaga. If he could spare Leon's life, he would. Even now, he would rather use Leon than destroy him. That's relatively rare for an action game villain. He speaks about the incessant war and suffering in the world, promises to put an end to that suffering if he can spread his hive mind parasite, promises a paradise free of all misfortune.
Well,
Sadler might really believe in these claims, though we've seen the state of his followers. They don't really look like they're living in paradise. Their lives look pretty miserable. He also claims that he can hear the voices of the people Leon killed over the course of the game, which suggests that even in death, someone's consciousness can live on in the Plaga hive mind in some form, which is pretty interesting. Sadler commands those voices to sing his praise, to worship him. And this, I think, reveals Sadler's true motivations. What he wants more than anything is to be worshipped. He wants to be praised. He wants to be beloved. He wants to be a god. Godhood is his true ambition. In his final form, you can see the extent of Sadler's total merger with the parasite. There is no distinction between his body and the parasite's body. They are one, which brings me to another discussion point. I've seen some people say that Sadler in this new remake story is not in control of his actions, that he is being controlled by the Plaga all along, that the true villain is the parasite itself, and the parasite is simply using him to spread itself across the world. Well, this idea does tickle my cosmic horror fancy, because they thought that no human is in control at all here, but instead all of humanity is being manipulated and controlled by a millennia-old inhuman parasite of unknown origins is definitely pretty horrific. However, I don't think this theory is really borne out by textual evidence. Just look at Sadler's visual design. There is no separation between him and the parasite. They are a single being. The parasite can't manipulate or control him in the traditional sense, because he is the parasite. He already wants whatever the parasite wants, because the parasite is him. For me, this spoils the theory that Sadler is not really in control here. I think Sadler is an excellent action game villain, not because he's a particularly complicated or emotionally dynamic character, but because his schemes are truly grand in scope, because his power is frightening, because his motivations are tinged with just enough genuine religious fanaticism to be a little more than a simple quest for personal power. I've seen people describe Resident Evil 4's story as lovable camp, a deliberately kind of goofy B-movie vibe. And in that kind of story, a villain whose plans are as ludicrous and grand as Sadler's fits into the story perfectly.
Church. I made it.
Right. Yes. I'll make attachable mines with it. Why am I still playing? Holy shit, I just realized I've kind of been playing for quite a while now, huh?
I think the village chief Mendez and
I'll
Ramon
go finish
Salazar
this
are
chapter
closely
and
linked
end it
as
there.
villains. They are thematically linked. They are two sides to the same coin. They are nearly exact opposites of each other. Just look at the two of them. Mendez is the size of 4 refrigerators stacked on top of each other, and Ramon is the size of an easy-bake toy oven. Mendez wears the dark and simple clothing of a priest, while Ramon wears flamboyant, colorful, aristocratic clothing. Or
Okay, it
compare
was
their
actually an egg this
environments.
time.
Mendez is the
That's
chief
what I
of
was
the
expecting
village,
to
which
find
is an
back
economically
when I
more
first
rural place,
realized
where
I could
everything
shoot
is
those.
shabby and dirty and run down. Whereas Ramon is the
Not
tyrant
realized,
of the
but
castle,
believed.
this luxurious and beautiful environment, where
That's what I
everything is
wanted for
clean and
believing.
elegant and decorative and expensive. Or compare how the two villains behave, how they interact with their protagonist. Mendez is always right in the thick of things. He fights Leon in person, one-on-one, face-to-face. He doesn't hide behind fortifications or high walls or traps or an army of minions. He is the one fighting. He is the one putting himself in danger. Whereas, until his boss fight, Ramon always keeps his person out of reach, behind elaborate defenses, behind an army of expendable soldiers. He makes far more use of traps and tricks. Most of the time he isn't even willing to speak to Leon in person, but instead through a PA system. If I wanted to get really crazy, I could write a whole essay about how class conflict is represented by these two characters. But if we don't think Resident Evil 4 is commentary on class warfare, or that its story is trying to tell us how we should all be dragging the rich out of their mansions and feasting on their flesh, what is the story of Resident Evil 4 doing? Why such drastic differences between these two settings and characters? Well, Resident Evil 4 is an action horror video game. It's a video game first, and the story mostly exists to fuel the horrific and bombastic gameplay. From that perspective, the differences between Chief Mendez and Ramon are important to the horror intention of the gameplay. Horror relies on discomfort. The player needs to feel uncomfortable so the horror can work for you to feel scared. The antithesis of discomfort is familiarity. The more familiar you are with something, the less scared you will feel. Now let's apply this idea to the setting of a horror video game. At first, the village in Resident Evil 4 feels really creepy and strange. But the more you explore it, the more time you spend in it, the less creepy and strange it will feel, because you become familiar with it. When players get too familiar with this setting, too comfortable, in order to maintain the sense of horror, the developers need to introduce a totally new setting, something completely unfamiliar, utterly different, and that's where the castle comes in. Resident Evil games always do this. In the first game, you go from this haunted mansion and then down into a crazy research lab. Or in Resident Evil 2, you go from the police station and then down into the sewers and then to another crazy research lab. I think these drastic changes in setting are really important to maintaining the horror across the whole game. Keep throwing players into new, unfamiliar environments. Don't let them get too comfortable with any one setting. And in Resident Evil 4, this dramatic change in environment is accompanied by a dramatic change in villains. Not only are you dealing with a new kind of setting, but are also a totally new kind of antagonist. Chief Mendez and Ramon are so closely linked together in my mind that I considered doing a big video where I did a full analysis of both of them together. But just for the sake of my own sanity, I decided to cut it into 2 smaller videos instead. So this video will be focused on Mendez, who is a villain that I actually really like. He's very simple and he doesn't have a ton of character or personality, but for his function within this action horror story, he is perfect. Mendez is this silent, hulking, nigh invulnerable brute who again and again, without any warning, just stomps into a scene, wrecks some shit, and then stomps right back out again, without saying a single word. He is terrifying and also kind of completely hilarious.
Oh, not this guy.
Who are you? You stop right there.
He shares a lot of similarities with Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake. Their animations and design are very similar. I wouldn't be surprised if the developers reused assets here. For most of the game, Mendez doesn't even feel like an actual character to me. He doesn't have a personality, he doesn't have any independent independent motivations. He only does exactly what Sadler tells him without any deviation. Again, just like Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, or another example of a similar character would be the Terminator from the first Terminator movie. Mr. X and Terminator both really aren't characters, they're just mindless killing machines. Mendez is a little different, he doesn't just kill. Whereas those other two examples were truly mindless, nothing but machines following orders, Mendez, to me, feels closer to a classic avatar of evil. To explain what I mean, I want to make another comparison that might sound a little crazy at first. Let's look at Calamity Ganon from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, because I think Calamity Ganon and Chief Mendez are similar types of villains. So, in Breath of the Wild, the developers took Ganondorf, a villain who had appeared in many different forms across the series, different characters with different powers and different motivations, but who all functioned as a source of destruction in their respective stories. The developers took all those different iterations of Ganondorf, and they condensed them down, concentrated them, distilled them into this being of pure wrath, destruction, and evil. And they called that concentrated being Calamity Ganon. Calamity Ganon is not a character, it is more of a natural disaster. It is humanity's incredible capacity for destruction and evil given mindless form. It has no thoughts, no motivations, no personality. It is an avatar of the collective evil of humanity. In the remake, Mendez feels similar to me, but instead of being an avatar for all the evil of all people everywhere, I think Mendez is an avatar of the Plaga parasite specifically. He is the Plaga's potential for evil, for destruction, for absolute control, for horror. All of that power condensed, concentrated, and distilled into a single man. That's why he doesn't speak, why the writers didn't bother giving him any motivations. He's not a man anymore, he's not a character, he is only an expression of the immense power and terror of the Plaga parasite. But when Mendez sheds humanity, when he reveals his horrific parasitic form, he's actually revealing the true horror, the true power, the true capacity for evil, which is held within the Plaga parasite. But let's take a step back, because we're getting a little bit crazy here. Resident Evil 4 is an action horror video game, and within that context, Mendez primarily functions as the enforcer for the villain. I'm a big fan of the James Bond villains. Basically, every single villain in all of those movies has an enforcer on their team. They're usually some big beef guy who almost never speaks, who has no personality or backstory or motivations. They just do whatever the villain tells them to. They enforce whatever his orders are. They're not really characters, they're just extensions of the villain's will, physical representations of his power. Think of on-job or Mr. Hinks in Spectre. At his most basic level, Mendez is an enforcer archetype, and he's a fantastic one. He's huge, he's menacing, he's scary, he's really tough. In that role, he is perfect. Now let's take a look at the actual story of Mendez within the RE4 Remake, because the remake has added a lot more backstory than he had before. There are 3 files you can find in the game which are labeled as village records, 2 of which you can find in the attic of Mendez's home. These were written by Mendez himself, and they explain his backstory, so let's take a look at all 3. The first reads, "The Elder entrusted the village to me today. He told me I can learn my duties as I go. I will start by keeping a record of the village. There are still many words I cannot write, but the Elder encourages me. I will do my best. There is a young boy who lives in the cabin by the lake with his grandfather. It seems that his mother was called to heaven upon his birth. His grandfather doesn't talk much, but the lad is very bright and spirited. He told me a story about a knight who rides a donkey every day. The boy's grandfather has fallen ill and his condition worsens every day. The boy worries terribly about him.
Crazy how little the Red Knight is.
As I took my leave, the old man pulled me aside and said, "If anything happens, you know what to do." I could only nod in response. It was a terrible night. Everyone stood around the cabin and watched as it burned to the ground. The boy looked on without saying a word. Even as dawn broke, he didn't move a muscle. The next day, he was gone. Here, Mendez is describing his very first day as leader of the village. In this village record, we see a very different Mendez than the mindless enforcer we confront in the game. This is a Mendez who genuinely seems to care about the people of the village. This is a Mendez who is learning, who is perhaps uncertain of himself, but still trying to be better. I think this adds a sense of tragedy to Mendez's the story. This caring and thoughtful character we discover through these records is essentially already dead by the start of the game. He was killed by the Plaga parasite. Mendez's old personality was completely wiped away by the parasite. He is just another mindless extension of its will now. But once, he was an admirable and worthwhile leader of this village. The boy described in this record is Luis. Soon I will post a video analyzing Luis's story in the remake, and we'll discuss that more then. What's important to us here is Mendez's
I remember that treasure.
story. Luis's grandfather had been infected by the parasite. When the old man says, if anything happens, you know what to do, he means that if he falls under the sway of what the villagers call a madness, he wants Mendez to kill him. He does not want to live on in that madness, because that wouldn't be a life. And I think Mendez doesn't. I think he did kill Luis's grandfather, as Luis himself watched on. This adds even more tragedy to Mendez's story. Once upon a time, he was willing to kill to stop the spread of this horrific madness. And in the present day, in his new twisted form, he has become one of the parasite's most effective tools. We can actually find a photograph of that elder who is mentioned here, the previous leader of the village, in the same attic where you find this file. Here it is. On its back are written the words, "Watch over the village in my stead, and may smiles always find you in photographs." Again, there's tragedy here. That elder, who, judging by the very sweet note he wrote on this photograph, was a good man who entrusted Mendez with the lives of the villagers. He asked Mendez to protect them, to lead them, and Mendez failed. He failed totally and utterly. Under his leadership, the village has been completely destroyed. The village that this old man asked him to watch over is dead. A dark place filled with nightmares stands in its place, and that is at least partially Mendez's fault. The second village record says, all the men cheered when they heard the boat as it raced across the surface of the water. That magnificent oil will surely help us catch fish easier than before. The ironworks was only built a year ago, but has already merged well with the village. Our sickles and knives shine like never before. The 2 fish we got from the deal will eat almost anything and are breeding well. The fish farm in the swamp is also making excellent progress. During the day, I teach literacy and mathematics to the children. Every evening, I dine with a single family to hear their grievances and recent gossip, all under the roof of this home we built. Since I opened the village up to the outside, we have prospered and the people are happier. Smiles have even started to appear on their faces. A strange group of black-robed people
I was actually half expecting that would happen.
and raised an ominous flag with a spider-like insignia upon it. After preaching about salvation and forgiveness,
Of course
they
I'm
injected
thankful
us
it
with
didn't
something
happen.
they claim will cure us of madness. Can they be trusted?
No,
Mendez's story has come
I
a long
definitely
way
wasn't
since that
hoping
last
I would
note.
suffer
You
from
can
a
see how
hammer
much he has
gigantes.
learned and developed in the way that his sentences have become much more complex. Compare how simplistic the sentence structure and vocabulary used in the first village record are compared to this second village record. He has led the village into a sort of golden age. He opened the village up to the outside world, invited industry into the region. He has improved his writing ability and learned mathematics, knowledge which he shares with the village children. He is a proactive and compassionate leader who listens to the concerns of the villagers. In this record, we also see Mendez's great family. The madness from the first note is still spreading among the villagers. Cultists from the castle promise to heal this madness with an injection. And Mendez, even though he is suspicious of these strangers, allows it to happen. Of course, the cultists injected everyone with the Plaga parasite, sealing their fates. This is very different from Mendez's backstory in the original. In the original game, Mendez was a priest who had been convinced to put aside his faith and worship the Plaga instead, and then preach the holiness of the Plaga to the rest of the villagers, converting them to the cultists' cause. In the remake, Mendez was a genuinely compassionate leader of the village, who was tricked by the cultists into allowing his villagers to be injected with the parasite. In this new version of the story, it was Mendez's naivety and gullibility, his desire to protect the people from the spread of madness, his trust in strangers with ulterior motives that led to his downfall. I do really like this new backstory. Firstly, because the tragedy of his story adds some much-needed pathos to his character. It is very sad to see a genuinely good man transformed into a mindless monster. And secondly, because I think it also adds some humanity to the villagers themselves. In the game, all of the villagers are just homicidal, crazy zombies. We don't really give it a second thought when we mow them down by the hundreds. But this new backstory gives us a sense of the people they once were, reminds us of their humanity. It's a smart writing choice and one I would have liked to see more of in the
Ooh, the
game.
shooting
There's
range.
one more village record, so let's look
I'll
at
do
it.
the
Date
shooting range
October
and
10th.
things.
The weather has been strange of late. The wheat withers and the cows grow thin. Date December 8th. There are signs of famine. It is true we lack the means to work the fields, but Lord Sadler's orders are absolute. Date January 30th. 30 people have starved to death. 5 cows will be slaughtered. Date March 11th. The patriarchs gather to cast lots. 6 more chosen for Lord Sadler. Date April. 8 more today. Date unrecorded. 4 more today. Date unrecorded. 11 more today. Date unrecorded. 2 outsiders got lost and wandered into the village. We took them to the altar for the ritual. No need to cast lots today. Even after being ejected by the Pog after becoming Sadler's puppet, Mendez continued to keep a record of the village, hinting that perhaps a little more of his original personality remains than we had thought. However, just compare the writing style here to that of the last record. Look how simplistic his vocabulary and sentence structure has become. It's even simpler than the first record. We can see how his intellectual capability has degenerated under the parasite's influence. We can also see here how brutal Sadler's reign is, and how little he cares about the people he rules. Those who don't die of starvation are sent to Sadler's research labs to be tortured in horrific experiments. In this final record, we see that even after being transformed, Mendez was still concerned for the lives of the villagers. He writes only of their condition. However, he doesn't care enough to actually protect them from Sadler. That almost saint-like leader from before is gone. Instead of protecting them, Mendez now facilitates their death and torture. It is a pathetic fall from grace for someone who had once been a compassionate man. From here, I want to watch each of Mendez's scenes in the game, and there's really not very many of them, to see how the game portrays his character in the present. Here's the first one.
Well, it's done and dusted, eh? Good stuff, man.
It hurts, you know. It seemed like you really wanted to talk.
I knew I could count on you.
Now,
Got a selection.
you're gonna smoke.
Good things on sale.
Most things will kill you. Oh, well, maybe just don't tie me then, huh?
Knife good, isn't
Oh,
it?
man. Not this guy.
Crossing your
Who are you?
T's,
Stop right there.
Will that be? Don't get yourself killed now.
In his first appearance, we see what Mendez has become. He's no longer that well-spoken, self-educated, and compassionate leader of the village who had discussions with a different family every night. He is now little more than a silent automaton, a brute, the mindless hulking enforcer of Sadler's will. He isn't even a character here. He is brute force personified. I do love it when he, without saying a single word, just throws Leon right through a wall. It is brutal. The game does do an excellent job of demonstrating his strength in this scene. He is immediately dangerous. He is presented as a deadly new obstacle for Leon to overcome. Also, I think his new
See
backstory
if New
and
Game
the
Plus
knowledge that
resets
he
the
mercy
shooting
killed
range
Luis's
and
grandfather
lets us get
does
more
add some
tokens.
interesting subtext to the scene. Before his transformation,
If
Mendez
it's
cared
fixed
about
for the
Luis.
entire
They
game,
could
that
have
makes
even
no
been called
sense.
friends. Now
How
they
are we
are
supposed to get them all?
They don't
Collect
even
them all.
interact because Mendez is. Mendez is a brainwashed puppet, and that's at least partially Luis's fault. Luis aided the Illuminati's cult, and look what it has done. On an unrelated note, it's completely hilarious that Leon tries to order Mendez to stop right there. Leon, my dude. Literally everyone in this village has been trying to kill you for the past hour. Why would you hesitate here? Why would you even try to talk to him? Leon, you are so dumb. Anyway, here's Mendez's next.
Oh, it does reset, but everything is available right from the start. Wacky. I'll just play 2 games.
Mendez wanders in, tosses Leon around like a football for a while, and then walks out again. See you later, dude. At least this time, Leon doesn't hesitate to at least try and defend himself. Once again, the developers are doing a fantastic job of establishing how dangerous Mendez is. He gets shot like 10 times in this scene, and doesn't react to a single bullet. His body might as well be made out of titanium. We get his first line in the game, "Your blood has accepted the gift." He knows that Leon too will soon be a part of their cult, and so doesn't consider him to be a threat at all, which is a terrible mistake. It's interesting to think that Mendez could have killed Leon right here, and that the Illuminatus might have succeeded in taking over the entire world. In a convoluted way, the mercy Mendez shows towards an enemy here that leads not only to his own undoing, but the unraveling of the entire cult. I would like to point out that this home is actually Mendez's home. It's clearly the nicest and most sturdy edifice in the entire village. In one of the village's records, Mendez mentions that all the villagers built it together. I think this home, its strength, its comfort, shows us what kind of world Mendez wanted to build for the villagers before the coming of the Illuminatus. I think he probably wanted the whole village to look like this house, for every villager to live in a comfortable home like this one, not the filth and the rot and the squalor that has overtaken the village in the time of Sadler's rule. If Sadler had never come, this is what the whole village could have been. A comfortable, sturdy, and safe place to live. It's interesting that Mendez, of all the villagers, is the only one who maintains the neatness and comfort of his home. It sets him apart from everyone else. Let's move on to the next scene.
Why am I suddenly just so good at the game now?
Let's move on to the next scene.
The targets are, well, particularly sturdy. One shot won't be enough for those, I'd wager.
I'm gonna go save and then do my roll.
Leon continues to get his butt totally kicked by this guy, and the developers continue to do a great job of showing how scary Mendez is. We get 2 more short lines from him, "Come child," and "Your soul requires cleansing." I talked about it more in my video on Osmond Sadler, but Resident Evil 4 uses a lot of traditional Catholic imagery and language in its portrayal of the Illuminati.
Did he just use a shotgun to blow up an explosive barrel? What the hell, man?
You have a lot of horror across all mediums, twists Catholic imagery and language to portray horrific characters and plots. It's probably worth doing a deep dive into sometime. Like, what is the effect of using Catholic imagery in horror? Why do so many horror writers do this? But that's a much bigger discussion than we have time for in this video. I do really like this little section of the game. I always like chase sequences in horror video games. Chases are effective because they're very basic and visible. Anytime I'm being chased in a horror game, I am totally focused in on that moment. You can't be distracted by anything else while being chased by a monster. Mendez only has one more appearance in the game, so
what the fuck? Yo!
Cease pointless struggling. Abandon your body to the will of our God.
Oh my god, that was the payload.
Oh, Almighty, grant me the strength to crush your enemies. Submit. Ashley, run!
Okay.
Mustn't wake up.
It takes so much longer to load back to the main game. Honestly, I really think they should have put that save point on the shooting range.
Let's get away.
I absolutely love how this scene starts. When Mendez just blasts Leon right through that wall without any warning at all. I really enjoy the way every single Mendez appearance starts the same way, with him rocking in unannounced and immediately breaking some stuff. And here we finally see Mendez's true form. Discover that he has completely abandoned his humanity. In this monstrous form, we see a visual representation of the
I finally have bonus frequency for all of the
Mendez
guns.
was once human,
But look at
educated,
this.
ambitious, compassionate, and caring. And now he's just a monster. In the original version of Resident Evil 4, he was always a monster. But in the remake, he is a monster who was once human, a tragic figure. He doesn't truly worship his new god. He doesn't have the intellectual capacity to worship his god, truly. In reality, he has been enslaved by his new god. And because that new god is rotten, the strength it granted him is rotten too and easily crushed by our human hero. His death is a truly pathetic one, a final pitiful cry. His soul so lost that he wastes his last breath begging for help from the man who was responsible for his transformation into a monster, for the total destruction of the village he had once led, and the loss of every single life he had sworn to protect. In the original game, Mendez was just another monster. In this remake, he is an object worthy of pity.
What exactly does 40% off resources mean? Does it mean I get increased rewards whenever I craft? Because the prices remain the same. I'll figure it out soon enough, I suppose. Or I could just look it up. For now. You know what? I'll go look up. Yeah, I'm saying honey pop. Hopefully I won't be dragged around too much by Toryu to play Terraria. Maybe I'll promise to just start doing it next week rather than tomorrow. But I am doing some writings, albeit slowly. Sure, I gotta pee. At least wait for this to quit, I guess. Dang it.
Different treatment from the developers of this remake than the other villains in the game do. Resident Evil 4 has 4 major antagonists: Osmond Sadler, Jack Krauser, Chief Mendez, and Romeo Salazar. In the remake, those other 3 antagonists have been given fuller backstories or more sympathetic motivations than they had back in the original release. For example, in the original, Sadler's past was a complete unknown, but in the remake, he has been rewritten with a pretty extensive family past related to the worship of the father. In the original story, Krauser was just a lackey of Wesker, but in the remake has been rewritten with new independent motivations that have nothing to do with Wesker and a much more sympathetic backstory. Likewise, in the original, Mendez was just a monster, but the remake is rewritten with a tragic backstory. He was once a compassionate leader, but was tricked into allowing himself and his village to be subjugated by the gods. Following this pattern, you would expect the remake to rewrite Salazar's story to give his character a more elaborate backstory to make him more sympathetic, to give him some independent motivations besides merely being sad or stupid. But to my surprise, that is not the case. If anything, Salazar is actually even more evil and less sympathetic and less complex of a character in this remake than he was back in the original. In the original story, Salazar was a sickly and lonely child who had been manipulated by the Illuminatus cult. He was a true believer in the Illuminatus religion and felt that he had to atone for his family's sin of sealing away the Plaga. He was a pitiful and weak character who possessed no strength of his own and was nothing but a pawn of stronger men's ambitions. In the remake, Salazar's backstory is very similar. He was still a sickly and lonely and vulnerable child who was manipulated by the Illuminados in this version. But in addition to that, he was now also a petty, vindictive, and insecure child who enjoyed hurting others. His new backstory has only made his character more evil, not more sympathetic like the other villains. But he does have some inner strength in the remake that he didn't have before. In the original, when he gets stabbed in the hand by Leon, Salazar bawls like a little baby. In the remake, when he gets shot right in the face by Leon, all it does is piss him off. His boss battle has also been completely redone in the remake. He is way stronger, way faster, way more mobile, has way more attacks. It is way harder to beat this time around. It's a vastly improved boss fight, and it's a boss fight that matches his new character.